Hey everyone, welcome back to Reissued. If you're new here, my name is Andrew. Today I'm going to be showing you how we made some DIY custom made from scratch doors for my PAX wardrobes. I didn't want to spend the money on new PAX doors. I was unable to find what I was looking for on Facebook Marketplace. I saw a couple pop up in the IKEA As Is section online, but they sold super quickly. And so I thought, since I want to customize these completely anyway, why not make them from scratch? I've seen a lot of videos out there about embellishing existing PAX doors by painting them or wallpapering them or applying molding detail. I have plans to do that myself, applying a textured screen to the front, doing a melamine banding border around the edge, painting the backs. I'll be hitting that one in the next video, so be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. But when it came to finding videos about how to build these doors from scratch, wasn't coming up with too many, and the ones that I could find that were really helpful were all in millimeters and centimeters, and here I am over in the US and everything's measured in inches. And so I thought I would create a dedicated video here about how we constructed these DIY PAX doors, including all of the specific measurements in inches. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet and snappy with all the information that you need to build your own PAX doors, so let's jump on it. First things first, let me catch you up with where we are with the wall of PAX wardrobes in my bedroom. I found my initial setup on Facebook Marketplace that had the two larger wardrobes, a lot of little drawers and pull-out shelves, and some of the large glass sliding doors that now live in my parents' bathroom. The glass doors are cool, but that wasn't the look that I was going for in my space, so it works much better in my parents' house. Over the last 8 months or so, I've continued acquiring different pieces from the IKEA As Is section, and so that left me with a nice functional setup here, albeit very exposed to the rest of the room, so we gotta get some doors on there to cover that up. It's also worth noting here that since this room is super dark, I opted to go with some of the built-in lighting that they make for the PAX wardrobes. The wires run straight through the back and are concealed from behind. We covered up 2 plugs in the process of installing these wardrobes, so there was plenty of places to plug in. And these lights have a sensor in the front, so when the door is closed, they'll turn off, and when the doors open up, they'll turn on automatically. We love that. We've also done some work to trim these out so they feel nice and built in. I do live in an old house, so all the walls and floors are super uneven, so after we got these level, there was a big gap behind, a big gap at the floor in the front, so we're putting some trim around those to finish that off and make everything look really built in. We'll continue that trimming process and paint everything out to be uniform in the next video when we do the finishing treatment on the doors and do the final reveal. Now let's get to door construction. We're going to be constructing our doors out of a 5/8 inch melamine that I purchased at the REISSUED for $10 per piece. This was a pre-used, pre-cut product. They're pretty close to the dimensions I need, but we'll need to cut them down just a little bit more to make them the right size. We're cutting them down to 19.5 inches by 90 3/8 inches using a table saw. These were the product dimensions of the FORSAND door featured on the IKEA website, and even though we're planning to apply a super thin melamine banding around the edges, we thought it was best to stick with the product dimensions as closely as possible. If you don't have a table saw to work with, you could draw a line and cut these down with the circular saw, or you could get your hardware store to cut these down to the dimensions that you need them if your hardware store does that. I've never done that before myself, but I've heard of people doing that before, so maybe that'll work for you. If you're working with the brand new store-bought sheet of melamine, you won't have this problem, but since we were working with pre-loved pieces of melamine, we had some issues with those pieces not being cut square. If your piece is cut a little bit crooked and you run it through the table saw, it will just continue to make your other cut crooked as well. So we had to make one good straight square piece and then use that as a template to make all the other ones square as well. Just because the measurements add up at the top and the bottom doesn't mean it can be square. It can be sort of like a parallelogram, if you will. So just be sure that if you're working with a pre-loved material that you're checking for squareness as well as for the right dimensions. Next, we use a circular saw to cut down the length to that 90 3/8 inch measurement. When we were cutting with the table saw, we were using a super fine blade, so it was able to cut through the melamine without any chipping, but here on the circular saw, this blade is a little bit rougher, and so we ended up scoring the melamine with a utility knife before going in with the saw to minimize the chipping out. This seemed to work better than our usual method of applying painter's tape to avoid chipping and tearing. I'm choosing to use melamine for this project mostly because that's what I found at the REISSUED and I want to keep this as affordable as possible. You also could use plywood or MDF depending on what you're looking for. MDF is a little bit heavier, plywood can sometimes warp. The melamine is nice and light so it's easy to work with, but we are going to have to apply an edge banding around the edges to finish off that exposed particle board. Again, we're going to hit that in the next video when we finish up the look of the doors. Now on to hinge placement. This was the thing that I was scouring the internet for. DIY PAX doors hinge placement. DIY PAX door hinge placement in inches. I am sure this exists somewhere on the internet, but I couldn't find it, so I'm gonna give it to you again right here. It's worth noting at this point that we are using the real deal complement hinges from IKEA. Again, I tried to get these in as is, but they flew out of the store like crazy. I'm sure there are cheaper alternative off-brands that you could get for these hinges because they were quite expensive, but I wanted to go with the real deal. It was worth it to me to spend a little bit more money there. We used several different methods to arrive at the hinge placement here. First, I saw this really helpful video from Alyssa. I'll link that video down below. If you're working with centimeters and millimeters and all that, her video is gonna be great for you. I was able to look at her measurements and convert them to inches just as a reference so that we could know which holes in the PAX wardrobe we wanted to screw the hinges into, and then create a template to test this out and make sure those dimensions were really gonna work. All right, so now that we have the dimensions, we're gonna lay the door out nice and flat, run the tape measure from one end to the next, and starting at the top, here are your measurements to mark. 4 7/8 inches, 41 3/8 inches, 49 inches, and 85.5 inches. Now, to double check and verify that your placement is correct, you should be able to turn the tape measure over, come from the other end, and those marks should line up the other way as well, again with all 4 numbers. Whenever we did this, it was like a 32nd of an inch off, so super close. So the important thing here is that each time you do another door, you want to start from where the top of the door will be so that the doors have the best chance of all being at exactly the same height. If you work from different ends, that little 32nd of an inch might make a difference in how the doors sit. It's also worth noting here that there is some wiggle room in the hinges. These can adjust slightly, so do the best you can to measure accurately, but there is a little bit of give there. After making those marks, use a T-square to extend the mark out further onto the door. This is going to allow us to line up the jig for drilling the holes. For drilling our holes, we're going to use a Forstner bit jig from Craig. This jig is super simple to use and is going to do all the rest of the work for us in terms of getting the distance from the edge as well as placing the screw holes. So first, you want to turn both of those little dials to the 5 setting, which is going to set the hole 3/8 of an inch from the edge exactly where we need it. Align the 0 center mark with the lines that we drew along those measurements, and clamp it down to hold everything in place. Next, you want to set the depth of the bit to the minimum setting. We want these to be deep enough to allow our hinge to be housed inside there, but not so deep so as to go all the way through or to go too deep and lose the strength where the hinge is. Lock the guide in place, and drill the holes. You want to speed the drill up all the way before pressing down and drilling the hole. That's going to allow it to enter most smoothly and give you that super clean edge. And then finally, you want to switch to a super small drill bit and drill pilot holes right into the little guide holes. That's going to give us a perfect placement for our screws. Unclamp the jig and repeat this process all the way down for each of the holes. Before we install these, we need to drill out those little tiny pilot holes a little bit more with a drill bit that matches the width of our screws. We've taped off the drill bit to the depth of our screws as well so that we know exactly how deep to drill. It's really important to drill these holes before we try to screw the screws in so the particle board doesn't try to push out the other side. Now we can hang the doors. We get the door in place, press the hinges into the holes that we made, and then use the included screws in those holes that we drilled to secure it in place. Okay, so I think we covered all the important parts on how to build your own PAX doors. Again, these edges are unfinished. We're going to be applying a melamine banding around to finish those off. I'm also going to be applying a sort of wallpaper treatment with some window shades that I got at IKEA as well. It's going to give a little bit of pattern and texture and look amazing. I'm planning to take that same banding from the side and put it slightly around the front just to give a little bit of architectural detail. I can't wait to show you how these are going to look in the final reveal next time. Be sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss it. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye.